Certainly. Here's Section 1 constructed as requested. A tightly written, focused narrative of 1,500 words, with a strong sense of pacing, character development, and plot momentum. The distress signal arrived as a scream, not of pain, but of something far worse, desperation. It pierced the fabric of subspace, bouncing between relay satellites and fleet AIs until it reached the heart of known space. By the time it hit the Deathworlders sectors, translation matrices were already collapsing under its complexity. It wasn't just data. It was memory, sound, emotion, and imagery layered like ancient code. Captain Vela didn't need the text to tell her the message was old, not by years or centuries, by millennia. "Filter out the noise," she ordered, fingers drumming on the reinforced synth steel of her command chair. Her voice was calm, but her crew could feel the tension coil in it. Prioritize anything visual. A scrambled series of images played across the main view screen. Shattered architecture under a red sun, what might have once been cities now reduced to burned latticework. And always, that same pulse echoing in the background, as if the signal itself was alive, a presence inside it, watching. "Captain, this origin point, it's not on any of our charts," said Ensign Rao, the youngest among them, his voice small in the humming silence of the bridge. "This system, it's off-grid. Unknown star, unstable orbit. We'd have to go dark zone to reach it." Vela already knew. That was the worst part. Plot a route. Minimum risk. Stealth frame engaged. Commander Brent, the Coal Theory weapons officer, shifted beside her. His scales pulsed with thermal patterns. A stress response for his species. "This smells like a trap." "Everything does," Vela replied. "But we don't ignore cries for help. Not on my watch." Brent's snort was dismissive. "You humans always chase ghosts. Out here, ghosts eat ships." Vela didn't rise to the bait. They weren't friends. Never had been. But he respected her enough to follow orders. And that would have to be enough. The fleet wasn't exactly a fleet. More like a patchwork of battered ships barely united under a common banner. Deathworlders didn't ally often. When they did, it usually meant something was so dangerous that even the most brutal survivors in the galaxy felt fear. 3 days out from the signal's origin, their long-range probes went dark. No debris, no response, just silence. "This far out, even light doesn't travel straight," muttered Vela, staring at the anomaly on the tactical display. A jagged, looping void in the signal trail. No natural phenomena matched its behavior. Space itself bent unnaturally near it. "Gravitic lensing," Brent muttered, "but with no visible mass. That's not physics. That's a warning." The ship emerged into orbit around the solar system's third planet, a scorched, half-destroyed moon tumbling in place, wreathed in ion storms. Great gouges crossed its surface, black trenches etched like claw marks. "Life signs?" Vela asked, knowing what the answer would be. Lieutenant Nere, the ship's AI liaison, shook her head. "None, unless you count decaying neural residue." That gave everyone pause. Neural residue was only possible if a mind had been active within the last few days, and it had to be powerful. Ancient minds, alien in form and process. The team disembarked onto Moon's surface clad in reinforced exormer. Wind scraped over the rock like glass on metal. The sky above was fractured, barely held together by gravitational anomalies. They moved through the ruins like ants picking through the bones of gods. The structure at the center was unmistakably artificial. A spire, half collapsed but humming softly beneath the surface. Power still flickered in its veins. Inside, the temperature dropped suddenly. Nerea's visor fogged. Brent clicked his mandibles in warning. "I smell memory here, like something watching through time." Vale approached the central dais. A crystalline console waited, untouched, perfect. Her hand hovered, then made contact. It lit up, responding to her touch. A form emerged from the shadows, small, broken, alien beyond recognition. Its body was shriveled, its skin paper-thin and translucent. Its eyes, large and dark, locked onto hers. No one moved. No one spoke. It tried to communicate. No words, only a projection, raw and disjointed. Visions of stars burning out, of fleets consumed, of something vast blotting out solar systems like drops in a bucket. Vela's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe, not from fear, but from understanding. The creature wasn't asking for help. It was warning them away. And then it died. Its final act, a transmission, not to them, but to the structure itself. The walls shook. The spire responded like a living thing, retracting metal limbs into the floor. A beacon launched into the sky, spinning, transmitting, awakening. On the ship, Ensign Rao screamed. "New signal incoming," he shouted over the comms. "Multiple points. Deep system. No propulsion, no heat, but they're moving fast." Vela ordered a full retreat. The shuttle roared back to orbit, the spire behind them collapsing as if it had finished its purpose. They weren't alone anymore. The enemy didn't look like ships. They were angular, almost organic, with matte black surfaces that devoured light. They moved in perfect synchronization, silent, precise, wrong. "Those aren't Deathworlders ships," Brent hissed. "They're something else." Vela watched them appear on the edge of the radar. "Nullborn," she whispered, not knowing where the word came from. The fleet jumped just in time. Whatever the Nullborn were, they didn't pursue. Yet, back aboard, silence reigned for hours. It was Commander Brent who finally spoke. "This changes everything. We cannot handle this alone." Vela nodded. "Then we find the others, even the ones we don't trust." They sent out the encoded message on all secure channels, coded with the image of the fallen alien's face and the last few moments of its warning. They didn't have proof, only wreckage, visions, and instinct. But for Deathworlders, that was often enough. As Vela stood at the observation deck, watching stars pass by, she felt it deep in her bones, an unease beyond tactical risk or political fear. This wasn't about resources or territory. This was something older, something no one had won against before. And now, the Deathworlders were on a collision course with it. She allowed herself one moment of stillness. Then she turned back toward the war table. There was planning to do, and war to come. The footage replayed on the central display, grainy but undeniable, a biomechanical monstrosity gliding through the ruins of a shattered planet, surrounded by what might have once been ships. They moved with eerie coordination, organic fluidity fused with technological precision. None bore insignia, none emitted signals. They simply existed, devouring everything in their path. Vela stood motionless, eyes locked on the looping clip. The Nullborn. The alien's final transmission had triggered the spire's memory core, unlocking a vision of annihilation. Star systems core like fruit, orbital defenses torn apart before they could fire. What haunted her most wasn't the destruction. It was the silence that followed. No debris fields. No survivors. No resistance. Just erasure. On the holopad beside her, Commander Brent flexed his claws, agitation pulsing through his thermal bands. "This footage is preposterous," he muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "A fabrication. Perhaps. Fear does strange things to dying species." "You saw with your own eyes," Vela said quietly. "They were real. Real and dead, perhaps. Ancient threats long extinguished. Ghosts." His voice faltered. Unless they're waking up." They said nothing for a long moment. The emergency summit had been called 2 standard days later, convened aboard a neutral war station in the orbit of Tau Ares. Officially, the summit was about protocol. Unofficially, it was about fear. Representatives from every major Deathworlder polity had arrived. Some armed to the teeth, others cloaked in energy fields or escorted by honor beasts. The room was carved from alloy and obsidian, cold and windowless. No banners, no names. Only necessity had brought them here. Vela stood among them, out of uniform, stripped of rank. It had been the condition of her admittance. She didn't mind. This wasn't about rank anymore. A Grivari elder floated into place, skin like crumpled mercury, voice a chorus. "What evidence do you bring, human?" Vela stepped forward and triggered the transmission. No dramatics, just the facts. She narrated the alien's final moments, the activation of the beacon, the Nullborn footage. No one interrupted. Some expressions hardened. Others turned distant. When the last frame faded, she let silence speak. Then the room exploded. "They're extinct," roared General Threx of the Vraxian Scourge. "Wiped out in the harrowing. This is Deathworlder mythology. Nothing more." "Then explain the beacon," said Vela, voice steady. "Explain the moving ships, the power signatures, the biological alloy analysis. Explain," hissed Threx, "why your crew left that moon alive if these things were real. Because they let us." The statement froze, even Brent in place. Vela met their gazes. "We were not a threat. We were observed, evaluated, then ignored." A murmur of unease passed through the assembly. An Ardhari priestess bowed her neck. "We all have stories of such things, silent watchers in the dark. But stories are not war declarations. They are if the watchers start moving," Brent growled. The summit devolved into posturing. Old grudges resurfacing like rot. Species who had never fought side by side argued over protocols, ancient treaties, and buried offenses. Brent stood at Vela's side through it all, muttering curses in his native tongue. "We'll tear each other apart before we even face them," he said. Vela didn't disagree. Later that night, a corridor explosion rocked the station. Vela was thrown off her feet, alarm klaxons slicing through the metal silence. The lights flickered. Brent appeared moments later, blood on his jaw, weapon drawn. Internal sabotage. Cold theory systems were targeted. Someone wanted access to our data vault. Vela rose, heart pounding. "You think one of them believes we're hiding something?" Brent nodded. "Or they want to ensure no one else finds out what we've already learned." The pursuit led them to the underdeck, twisting corridors repurposed from old mining ships. In the dark, flickering light of auxiliary power, they cornered a thief cloaked in stolen Vraxian armor. The being fought like a phantom, fast, surgical, inhumanly precise. When they finally pinned it to the deck, it bled blue. "Urani," Brent spat. "I thought they refused to attend." "They did," said Vela grimly. "Which means this wasn't about diplomacy. It was reconnaissance. They found a data crystal in the infiltrator's grip, encrypted, but the glyphs etched into its side were unmistakable. Ancient stellar maps, identical to the one seen in the Spire's final vision. Coordinates scattered across known and unknown space." Vela stared at them, pulse racing. "These aren't just warnings. They're records, locations." Brent leaned closer. "Nullborn systems? Or victims?" Back in the summit chamber, things had changed. The footage was reanalyzed. The beacon's emissions correlated with dozens of uncharted anomalies. Every system matched a known extinction event. Every timestamp aligned with the last signals ever received from those sectors. Someone in the room whispered, "This isn't new. It's been happening for millennia." A vote was called, not for war, not yet, but for unity. A reconnaissance fleet, a coordinated Deathworlder task force. Small, agile, and committed. The decision passed, barely. Not everyone agreed. Late that night, a transmission arrived on a private channel to Vela's console. It was short, no voice, only coordinates. She recognized the encryption. Human origin. Deep black protocol. She almost didn't open it. Inside was footage from a ship long presumed lost in a fringe system. The final logs were corrupted, but one visual remained. A Nullborn vessel emerging from an asteroid field, turning to face the camera before the feed cut out. The ship's name was Valkyrie. Vela's sister had served aboard. She stared at the frozen frame for a long time, not blinking. They had been warned, not just by the alien, by their own dead. In the hangar, the Deathworlder fleet assembled, not grand, not unified, but resolved. Vela stood beside Brent as the last crates of ordnance were loaded. "We're not ready for this," he said. "No one ever is," she replied. He grunted. "You're starting to sound like me." "No," she said, stepping onto the boarding ramp. "I'm starting to understand you." As the ship rose into black, her thoughts turned to the stars they were heading toward. Not cold and empty, but watched. Watched by something that had already seen what they were, and chose not to finish them yet. That, more than anything, terrified her. And yet she pressed forward, because the alternative was to wait for death. And Deathworlders did not wait to die. The recon fleet emerged into the shadow of a dead star. Once, this system had held 7 thriving planets, remnants of an ancient empire known only through shattered ruins and distorted myth. Now there was only silence. No light, no heat, a darkness so complete that it didn't just obscure, it devoured. Captain Vela stood on the bridge, hands folded behind her back, eyes locked on the hollow sphere orbiting the collapsed sun. It wasn't natural. A Dyson shell, but fractured, incomplete, as if something had begun to build and then stopped. Confirming structure mass, Nere said. 70% collapse. Surface riddled with impact points. No heat signatures. No active defense. That's what worries me, Brent muttered, claws twitching. The fleet held back, cloaked in sensor-dampening fields. Small scout ships detached, gliding toward the outer edge of the sphere. Vela watched as one disappeared behind a shard of broken plating. They waited, and then, static, screaming, a garbled signal, looping. One word, untranslatable. The feed cut. No detonation. No intercept, Rao said, blinking at a screen. Just gone. Vela felt the shift, something stirring beneath the silence. Not a trap, not a weapon. An attention. Get them back. Too late. The Dyson shell cracked. A low hum trembled through space. A resonance, not mechanical, but biological. It bypassed sensors and entered minds, blooming like mold behind the eyes. Rao clutched his temples. Nere whispered nonsense. Even Brent staggered, growling as if under assault. Vela activated the neural dampeners. Cut all external feeds. Hold formation. The noise stopped instantly. Psychogenic field, Brent spat. A signal designed to be thought. But by what? Vela asked. No answer came. They launched drones this time, soulless, silent, disposable. They sent back images. A city within the shell, overgrown with black lattice, pulsing like tissue. Nullborn architecture. Not built, but grown. Nothing's moving, Nere reported. Vela watched one drone descend through a breach and enter the core. The footage flickered. Rooms filled with fossilized corpses, locked in prayer or fear. Some alien, others terrifyingly familiar. Deathworlders. Expedition ships, she whispered. From 100 worlds. Brent's voice dropped. All gone. The drone reached the heart of the city, where a throne of fused bone and alloy sat empty. Beside it, a second beacon. Don't touch it, Brent warned. We won't, but it already knows we're here. The beacon pulsed. And far beyond the system, along the fringe of the recon fleet, every sensor lit up at once. They're coming, Rao whispered. Hundreds of Nullborn signatures, emerging not from real space, but from gaps between dimensions. Not hyperspace, not subspace. Something colder, older. They were never sleeping, Vela said. They were building. The fleet had no time for tactics. Orders went out, scatter, cloak, run. But the Nullborn didn't attack immediately. They surrounded. A single ship, larger than the rest, approached. Not sleek, not beautiful. A shape designed to horrify. It pulsed with memories of annihilation. It sent a signal. Not a threat. An offer. Surrender. We don't even know what they want, Nere said. They want us not to exist, Brent replied. It's cleaner that way. Vela made the call. Prepare for contact. Her ship-powered weapons, but didn't fire. The Nullborn vessel stopped just shy of range. From its hull, a shape detached. Humanoid, impossible, drifting on its own into open space. It wasn't a weapon. It was a messenger. Bring it aboard, Vela ordered, ignoring Brent's protest. The chamber was sealed, weapons trained. The figure was silent, skin like polished stone, its face featureless but expressive. It did not breathe, but stood still, radiating understanding without words. Nere whispered, It's not a pilot. It's a construct. Then it moved, not violently, gracefully. It extended a hand. In its palm, A projection bloomed. Images, histories, fates. Every world that had resisted, gone. Every world that had submitted, preserved but twisted, rewritten, were being offered survival. Vela said. Brent growled. That's not survival. That's assimilation. The Nullborn never spoke. It didn't need to. The message was clear. Kneel and exist as something else. Resist and vanish. The construct retracted its hand. Vela stepped forward. You're here because you think we'll break. No answer. She drew her sidearm. The construct didn't flinch. She holstered it. We're Deathworlders, she said. We don't kneel. The construct tilted its head, curious, not angry. Then it vanished. Moments later, the Nullborn fleet retreated, not in defeat, in patience. They're not afraid of us, Brent said. No, Vela agreed. They're watching. The recon fleet returned in fragments, the summit already in chaos. But something had changed. They had been given a choice. And that, for Deathworlders, was a declaration of war. The stars burned brighter at the edge of known space, not because they shone more fiercely, but because the dark beyond had begun to swallow their neighbors. The Deathworlder Alliance fleet, hastily christened, bruised from a dozen internal conflicts, held formation in orbit above Ostra 9, a cold, storm-racked world chosen not for its strategic value, but because it was the last and firm location of a Nullborn emergence before contact ceased. Scars of orbital bombardment still glowed in the planet's upper atmosphere. None of the ground installations remained. Only ash and impact craters spoke for what had once been an independent colony. Captain Vela stood in her command chamber, surrounded by fractured projections of Allied ships. Most were war beasts of metal skin, Vraxian dread cruisers, Etherborn needlecraft, Gravari mobile reefs, and 2 battered Terran carriers that still bore the burn marks of ancient wars. Their captains' expressions ranged from resolve to haunted. No one smiled. There were no speeches. Instead, Vela raised her hand, and a model of the Nullborn fleet appeared in the center of the holosphere. It had grown exponentially. The vessels had altered shape since their last sighting, shedding the more grotesque symmetries for sharper, crueler designs. They were learning, adapting. They arrive in 30 hours, maybe less, she said. Their trajectory is deliberate. They know we're here. They've chosen this place. Which means they want us to fight, Brent growled, his claw tapping against the metal floor. Test their harvesters. Measure our last breath. We give them nothing freely, Vela said. A Gravari war oracle blinked slowly. And if we lose? Vela didn't blink. Then we lose together. Silence followed. Then, one by one, the fleet captains began sending power sync signals. Defensive nets activated. Weapons charged. No orders needed anymore. They understood the terms. Aboard Sentinel Grey, Vela met Brent one last time before engagement. The silence between them had changed. Where once it had been suspicion, now it was shared burden. They'll come for our minds first, Brent said. Break cohesion. Drown us in hallucination. Neural dampeners are fully synchronized across the fleet. Shared memory fields. If they want to manipulate us, they'll have to do it to all of us at once. They will, he said grimly. The Nullborn didn't descend like invaders. They emerged, coalescing from folds in space, their presence bending gravity, mass, and even time. The darkness that accompanied them was not the absence of light. It was active, crawling, consuming. Each ship was a cathedral of extinction, bristling with tendrils that shimmered like the surface of still water. The first volley came from the Terran destroyer Odys. Twin ion lances punched through vacuum and struck the lead Nullborn ship, but the impact twisted. Metal and matter flowed like liquid. The energy was absorbed, then redirected, exploding outward in a perfect reflection back at Odys, which shattered in silence. No kinetic feedback. Neri reported, sweat shining on her brow. Their reflecting force, learning faster than predicted. Change vector, Vela snapped. We can't fire straight. No symmetrical attacks. The Gravari launched living torpedoes, bioorganic charges capable of latching onto a ship's skin and eating through alloy. They made contact, burrowing deep, For a moment, it looked like progress. Then the Nullborn adapted again. The torpedoes turned, still alive, and flew back toward their creators. Gravari's ship screamed. The sky burned. They don't just consume. They reprogram, Rao whispered. Vela watched one of the Nullborn ships fracture into hundreds of mirror-like shards, each flying on its own vector, then reassembling behind a fleeing vessel. Predatory intelligence, not instinct. Intention. Hold the line, she commanded. Do not scatter. The Etherborn deployed their echo veil. Fractal illusions across dimensions, a field of phantom ships impossible to track. For minutes, it worked. The Nullborn hesitated, began firing wildly. That's when the trap was sprung. Vela's strike fleet uncloaked behind confusion, dropping from high-orbit positions with fusion blades lit. It wasn't enough to destroy. Nothing ever was. But it broke a piece of the formation. One Nullborn ship drifted, vulnerable for just a heartbeat. Brent was there. His ship Blacktooth rammed it at full velocity. Both vanished in a shockwave that left a rip in space. Howling open. No signal from Blacktooth, Nere said. Vela didn't respond. She couldn't. The battle stretched into hours. No victors. Just attrition. The Nullborn didn't bleed. They didn't retreat. And yet they responded. Every tactic changed the next response. Rao shouted from his console, "We've located a command core inside their lead vessel. It's generating a command frequency, likely coordinating their cognitive net." Vela didn't hesitate. Target it. A spear formation the fastest ships punched through. Etherborn stingers in a Terran carrier, the Valkyrie. Vela had never expected to see that name again. "Who's flying the Valkyrie?" she asked. No one knew. The final run was suicidal. But it worked. The Valkyrie dove straight through the Nullborn carrier's open cortex and detonated its entire core. The resulting implosion was unlike anything seen before, a wave of stillness, an anti-shock that froze Nullborn movement for a critical second. "Now!" Vela shouted. Every surviving ship concentrated fire. Not in patterns. Not in formation. Just chaos. Random angles. Unpredictable vectors. The Nullborn couldn't reflect what they couldn't predict. They began to fall. Not many, but enough. The moment didn't last. The surviving Nullborn ships adapted again, regrew missing limbs, altered their cores. But something had changed. The coordination imperfect. The signal fractured. They had struck a nerve. The Nullborn fleet turned. They left, not defeated, not destroyed, but stalled. Vela stood alone in the ruins of her bridge. Most consoles dark, hull vents leaking air into the void. The stars beyond were stained with debris. Only 12 Allied ships remained functional. Another 19 floated crippled. The rest were gone. Brent's ship never reappeared. She stood in silence until a ping echoed from the comms bay. A single line of code. A message. Not from the Nullborn. From the Valkyrie. She opened the file. A voice warped, speaking through static. Not all of us were lost. Not all of them are machines. Some remember. Then it cut. Vela looked up at the stars beyond. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, they had wounded the dark. And the dark had blinked.